Today is Tuesday, October 10th, and you're listening to the Beer Temple Podcast.
Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again.
Hello, and welcome to the Beer Temple Podcast. I'm your solo host for the day, Mike Shalau from Is Was Brewing. Chris is in Italy. Probably having a great time, to be honest. I bet he's drinking some nice wine, eating some food. Probably thinking about the podcast a lot, wondering how it's going, fretting about, everything he frets about when we're doing it in person.
The mailbag.
Right, yeah. He's incessantly reading the mailbag, reading your reviews.
Yep.
He's been sending me screenshots of all the great reviews you guys have been sending in. But so when the teacher's away, the students get to play around and have a little bit of fun while people... Yeah, you can come in. You got it. You go through the bottle shop. Yeah, go to the bottle shop if you can. Okay. Okay. Anyway, so we do record this in a bar, that is. And we try to tell people not to come in here with a sign, and yet they figure they can still walk in through. That wouldn't happen if Chris was here. It's already off the rails. Yep. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for listening. Thank you, WLPN, for having us on Lumpin' Radio. Rate and review the podcast, which we probably should ask for more often, but it really does help us. And we're bringing back one of people's favorites, the beer that changed my life, the one-on-ones with people I really care about. I want to hear their stories more. So today's guest has brewing in his blood. His great-great-grandfather had a presence across Poland and Czechia, brewing beers, selling hops, and manufacturing brewing equipment in the 19th century. So it may have been fate for today's guest when he quit his job as a sales manager for a tech company to attend the World Brewing Academy in Chicago and Munich, Germany. With his master's brewer diploma in hand, he honed his brewing skills at Lagunia's Chicago facility and Emmett's Brewing Company in Downers Grove. In the summer of 2020, he opened Goldfinger Brewing Company. He followed in his great-great-grandfather's footsteps by designing a brewery himself to make the best lager beer he possibly could. He designed a decoction brew house, specially wort aeration process, naturally carbonates all his beers, and lagers them in horizontal tanks. In 2022, Goldfinger was ranked 5th favorite lager brewer in the world in Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine's annual Who Brewed It Best readers poll, which is about 4 slots too low, in my opinion. His beers are some of the only beers that reside in my fridge all the time besides my own. And he is someone who I felt lucky to get to know and brew with and to get to call my friend. Everyone, Tom Beckmann, Goldfinger Brewing Company. How you doing, Tom?
Wow. Thank you so much. What an incredible introduction.
Yeah, we try to gas you up a little bit and remind you of how great you are before we start the interview or the talks.
Well, I'm grateful to call you my friend as well.
Thanks. How are you doing? What's new?
Oh, I'm doing great.
Yeah, you look great.
Thank you. Been pretty busy. We just had our Oktoberfest, so usually I can't do anything else related to the business except planning that.
Yeah.
So I'm a little relieved that it's over. It was a success, and now I can focus on our production expansion and just kind of honing in our beers. For some reason, after Oktoberfest, I got hit with like a ton of motivation to collect. We're now collecting like 20 more data points in like our entire process, because I felt like there was a pretty big void and stuff that if something were to go wrong or something were to be great, we wouldn't even be able to identify what it is. So that kind of stuff still is exciting to me, which I'm pretty grateful for.
Yeah. That's like the short game of the golf analogy, where like to make the beer good enough is the hit it in the fairway. And then when you're trying to make putts, it's like this small minutia of like we need these 20 more data points to kind of see trends and see things that are actually affecting this and see things that aren't necessarily, and then try to hone these even better.
Totally.
And when you do stuff like that, you're always just trying to perfect the idea of what you're, because you're a brewery that makes mostly, you're saying, core beers more often than a lot of other breweries. Are you trying to change those beers in other ways, or just perfect the idea of them to you? Or is there a platonic ideal of each of those beers that exists in your head? Or is it just that you know, like it's like some sort of BJCP guideline that you're trying to hit?
No, I think if you have our original lager, you'd probably think that we don't fit necessarily. Our Helles doesn't fit necessarily in the BJCP guidelines. Certainly not a Munich-style Helles. It's definitely more on the, I guess, hop character side. Wouldn't say like ultra bitter, but definitely more hop flavor than what a BJCP guideline would say. No, I think that my palate is really annoying, and right when I really like one of our beers, then maybe it's something that I ate before or whatever it is, I'll be like, wait, what just happened there? Yeah. What's that thing what's that feeling that I had on the back of my tongue? I thought, I don't want that feeling. Let's figure out where that came from. And so right now we're in the data collection point to like, there's certain things in some of our beers that I'm kind of trying to work toward, but before we start just kind of flying blindly into changing things, we're collecting more data in the hot side and the brew house and in fermentation, in yeast pitch rates and viability. And then from that, after we're going to do it for about the next 2.5 months, which is good for us, because we do brew like basically 2 beers all the time, which is our original and our pills. But most of our core beers we brew very frequently, so we're able to kind of collect a lot of data in a shorter period of time because of that. But we do have to wait for the lagering to happen, so I don't want to start getting too bogged down in different things that I think it is, because I do have ideas of what might be, leading to some of the, I wouldn't say off flavors, but imperfections that I'm striving to perfect. But we're going to wait till we know what we're talking about, and then take it one... And then
change a bunch of things.
Yeah, change fundamentally.
Once. Yeah. Switch multipliers.
Yeah,
smash
exactly. Yeah.
That's great. Well, I look forward to the even more perfect lagers that will come out of Goldfinger once you collect the data. Well, the jumping off point for this show is always that I ask about a beer that changed your life. And so I was expecting some esoteric German or Czech or Polish lager beer. Nope. But Tom, tell me about a beer that changed your life.
Yeah, that question ended up being a little harder than I anticipated to answer, because there are 3 beers in general that played a pretty big role in the early stages of it.
We can talk about all of them at some point during the show.
Okay.
You sent me one.
I sent you one because of all 3, this one was kind of the one that stood out the most to me, to have the biggest influence on me and kind of launch me into mindfulness in the beer world.
I like that.
And it was Anchor's Summer Beer.
Hell yeah. I misread that when you sent it to me. I was like, damn, this guy's doing steam beer. Anchor's Summer Beer. I don't even know if I've ever had Anchor's Summer Beer. Will you describe what that beer is?
Sure. So, of course, it came in the custom Anchor bottle, my favorite shape of a bottle.
It It is. Great.
With the same placement of the label, but this label was all white with green letters. And it was, I actually, full disclosure, I have a very vivid memory of the beer, but back then I didn't know what I was talking about.
Sure.
So my experience with it was just that I enjoyed it, and I could describe what I enjoyed about it. But in anticipation of this show, I went back and read it, and for the first time, literally figured out that there was wheat malt in it, and it was basically like an American summer wheat beer.
Cool.
I just remember it being so refreshing, but dry and perfect for the hot summer. It was an ideal beer, pretty flavorful too.
When did you have this?
So I had it on Memorial Day of 2006. The reason I remember this is because it was the first. So my family always does a big Memorial Day celebration every year. We've been doing it for decades. And this was the first Memorial Day that I invited some college friends that I had met. And we were out in my parents' backyard. I don't even remember the food that we had, but I remember there was a 6-pack. I don't even know who got it of this Anchor summer beer. And at the time,
Stole some old person's beer.
at the time, I was drinking a lot of I think my premium beer at the time was Rolling Rock.
Classy, nice.
Yeah.
Chris would love that.
But when I wasn't so classy with my drinking, which was more often than I'd like to admit, it was like Bud Light or, depending on what party I was at in college, maybe even Keystone.
Wow. Nice.
So that kind of was that trained my palate that was beer, because I wasn't much of I never drank in high school. So
Yeah,
college
same.
was where I started exploring it, and I was like, I guess this is beer.
Yeah.
And then I see this kind of classy bottle, not some
It's great shape.
great shape, not some terrible can, because that back then bottle was still considered the premium beer. Right?
Personally, I think it still is.
I agree. If our retailers would be down for Goldfinger and bottles, then I'd
That'd be
totally
awesome.
go that way.
Did you go Stumpy bottles? What would you?
But initially, we were actually thinking 4-packs of half-liter bottles,
Oh.
like the German
The
size.
urban chestnut style.
Exactly. But I also really like long necks.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I love bottles. I loved Lagunitas bottles.
They are way more romantic and cooler and unique, and like every can fundamentally is structurally the same thing.
Yes.
Like they just all are.
Yep.
And so maybe they're like 16-ounce cans or bigger pallets to put artwork on and all that kind of jazz, but still the same exact look. Whereas
Right.
There's something cool. Like remember old Michelob bottles? Like those those were cool and weird. Yeah. I used to collect glass bottles when I was a little kid. Like I would have them on my bookshelf because I thought they
Nice.
were cool. But anyway,
I agree with you. I think it was another way to show kind of, I don't know, there's something artisan about you actually thought about the actual vessel that it's going in, not just the label on it. It's this is how I want to present my beer to people who don't know the art behind it. So It was interesting though, because when I was in Germany, very socialist in this respect. They have all the same bottle. You're not allowed to have different shaped bottles.
oh, because there's a huge recycling program, right?
Yes, exactly. So
That's fair.
so I mean, they're obviously the labels are different, caps are different, but the bottle shape is the same.
Sure.
So anyway, I saw this just beautiful, classy looking bottle, and I was like, hey, I'm at my parents' house. I feel not like a piece of garbage. Like
You could say that.
college guy. I'm like, I'm gonna class it up this weekend at Memorial Day at my parents' house. So I was like, I'm gonna reach for this bottle. So I cracked it open and it was pretty aromatic. I just remember it not smelling like kind of acetaldehyde, Rolling Rock, or like unpleasant sulfur of like a Bud Light. And then the palate was pretty full, especially considering light beer was kind of my diet at the time. So really nice, beautiful, full palate with really refreshing hoppiness, somewhat bitter, more bitter than what I had been drinking, but still finished nice and dry and just like absolutely refreshing. And it was a sweltering day too. So it was just like, man, this is what I want. So I asked my parents next year. I basically like declared this is the Memorial Day beer. Like we have to have this every Memorial Day.
That's awesome.
And we did that for a couple of years, but then I got interested in more beers. So it went kind of by the wayside.
So after having that the first time, did you immediately start seeking out other craft beers, or was it right back to like Rolling Rock?
Honestly, it was the first time I paid attention to beer.
Yeah. And was your world just that beer existed, and then also all these other like macro beers you were drinking existed, or did it open a door to like, oh, there's a lot of other stuff out here that I should be paying attention to?
It opened a door to something that I was not even close to being on my radar.
Yeah.
Beer, alcohol, like, I don't know, in general. Wine had always kind of been the alcohol that we would consume at home. Like my parents would let me have a little bit of wine, like for a holiday celebration or something like that.
I never drank in high school with like my friends, but every once in a while at dinner I would get like an ounce and a half of wine. And be like, I'm very classy.
Yeah. So paying attention to like what I'm actually drinking I went into like alcohol thinking that it was something that got you inebriated.
Sure. I think almost everyone does.
Yeah. So didn't pay attention to it too much. But after drinking that beer, I wouldn't say that I immediately went to the store and collected every craft beer I could.
Yeah.
It just made me aware for the rest of my life that, wait, this isn't just a functional way of getting tipsy. Like this is actually can be enjoyable and complex and interesting. So yeah, I just kind of started paying attention more. I upped my standard of beer and got into some Mexican imports. And that's what we would drink in my dorm. Well, it wasn't dorm room. We lived in an off-campus house with three of my really good friends that were in a band with me, and we would drink. We'd just get like cases of Pacifico,
Nice.
and that kind of was our standard. We stopped slumming it with the Bud Lights.
So there was something to like your, not your persona, but like that about you, where you're like, well, we just don't drink Bud Light anymore. Like I'm going to try to actually, even if it is a macro lager of some sort,
Yep.
I'm going to try to drink something I care about a little bit more, or something that at least I perceive has a little bit more flavor.
Yep.
And so beer was now more part of your vibe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I went like the next summer to visit one of my roommates who from Newport Beach, and his mom got us a bunch of Fat Tire. And so then we were like, oh yeah, we're ready for this. Like we've been training our palate for some good stuff. So we were drinking Fat Tire, man. Now thinking about how much Fat Tire we drank that night, it was just disgusting.
And that was the pre-golden.
That was
ale
the
days.
pre-golden
In fact,
ale. Yeah, that was a
true Fat Tire.
saucy amber ale.
Yeah. When you look back on that experience, are there any direct things you can pull from when you drank that beer, or what the beer was itself, or how it made you feel, that you use currently in making Goldfinger beers? It's okay if the answer is no. I'm not trying to lead you down any path, but if there are.
I think yeah. I don't know. I wouldn't say consciously. Like I'm not designing a beer and thinking like back to that specific experience. But I would say subconsciously opened a realm of possible experience with beer that I hadn't previously considered, and kind of made me more aware that beyond just the ingredients, beyond the flavor, time and setting, and the appropriateness of that beer in that specific time and setting is another ingredient in making beer.
Yeah.
But that's just subconscious. I don't actually think back to that one day every time I mash in.
Yeah. I also, I mean, not to impose thoughts or feelings onto you, but you're someone who cares so much about the presentation of beers, not just in the packaging of it, but the actual pouring of it and how you get the beer into the glass, that hearing you talk about how striking the bottle and the label and all that was makes a lot of sense to me, that you had that beer with your eyes before you really drank it. So your attention to how you present your beers to people, to me, as someone looking and listening to your story, seems to be something that is still an important aspect to the beers you make and the beers you present to people.
Yeah. Ironically, though, I couldn't tell you the clarity of the beer.
You drink it out of a bottle?
Just drank straight out of the bottle.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird? And that's something, clarity is something that I really care about at Goldfinger.
Sure.
And color is something I really care about. But that didn't matter to me back then when I had the summer beer. It was just like, I don't care what color this is.
Sure.
It could be hazy. I could be drinking autolyzed yeast in there. I don't care. It tastes great.
Probably was a little hazy, right?
Probably was.
Heavy beer.
Probably.
I wonder if that would have changed your opinion of it. If you saw like something that was a little fuzzed up in a glass, if you wouldn't have thought it was so
I don't know.
striking.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I would have thought it looked dirty.
Yeah. Who knows?
Who knows?
But maybe all your beers would be Keller beers now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I might have been more open to it because one of the other beers that I was thinking about, which does sort of track more with what we do somewhat. My younger brother, I don't even remember what the connection was, but we had like a temporary German exchange student come for like a few weeks. It was something through the school, and he brought a Paulaner Hefeweizen in his bag.
That's crazy.
And my entire family shared this half-liter bottle. And I mean, I didn't know what I was looking for, but I looked at my dad's reaction, and he loved it. So I'm like, all right, I think I should love this too. But what's not to love? It was a beautiful representation of a Hefeweizen. And again, same kind of thought process there, like how I had an idea of what beer was, and that completely shattered it.
Sure. And seeing like how it affected people, the people you cared about, right?
Exactly.
That has an important impact on why you like something.
Absolutely.
Or why you make something. I mean, it does for me, for sure.
I mean, when I think about beer, I think about my dad. I can't not think about my dad.
Yeah.
Every experience, I mean, I'm at my parents' house having this summer beer that changed my life. I'm watching my dad react to a Hefeweizen, and even when I was not even interested in beer, my dad was drinking imports and other stuff, and he let me try he actually had a Victory Prima Pils.
Oh, wow. So your dad was doing it.
He was doing it,
yeah.
And he let me try it. I thought it was disgusting, like incredibly bitter and just terrible. I actually really like that beer. But he gave me the bottle cap, and it was a blue with a red V on it.
Very cool.
And that started a bottle cap collection. So I've kept that. I don't know where they are anymore, but I had do you remember Red Dog? That was my two favorites were the Victory and the Red Dog, because there was an actual Red Dog on the cap.
That's awesome. I don't know if I've ever actually had Red Dog, to be honest.
I don't think I have either.
But, my time, yeah.
But I had the bottle cap.
Yeah. Well, so you bring up your family and your dad. Can we talk a little bit about like your great grandfather? Is that on your paternal side or is that maternal?
It is on my paternal side, yeah.
So Marcus, is that
Marcus
Goldfinger?
Goldfinger, yeah. Don't know much about him. It's been difficult to uncover a lot of the history around that, just because this was pre-World War One. Documentation back then, I mean, Poland wasn't like an independent country, so they didn't really have an archive that was being collected specifically for those artifacts. Although some of those were preserved. What we ended up doing is I have a cousin in Warsaw, and he really dedicated himself to discovering my family's lineage, and has some absolutely wild stories about uncovering things. For example, Marcus, the Goldfingers and the Glucksmans, they're all my family. They had a brewing equipment manufacturing company in Krakow. And they had cousins that were trading hops in Czechia, in Prague specifically. They had a brewery in the town of Lieben inside of Prague. So they were really deeply ingrained in the beer world at the time. And one of their claims to fame was that they brewed the beer for Kaiser Wilhelm's first visit to Poland.
Oh, wow.
So it was the official beer. So like we have the address of where the brewery is. The building is still standing, but I hear there's like a sex shop there now, and
Times change.
Times change. So we have like the original plans, like of the brewery with the facade of the building, which still exists today.
So first you said you don't know much about this guy, and now you have the original plans of the brewery.
I mean, but it's been tough to find information. But as far as we know, they were making equipment. I think one of the most impressive stories about the equipment and kind of the size of their business at the time is this is pre-automobiles, and a Zwickel valve with Marcus Goldfinger's emblem on it was discovered like 500 miles away from where their factory was.
Wow.
So whether that was a Nazi grabbing it in Krakow and taking it to the Russian front or something, or that they were actually distributing that equipment that far, we don't know, but still pretty impressive that you could find that kind of stuff kind of all around, because it was kind of, I mean, it wasn't exactly industrialized there.
Right.
So yeah, we've continued to look for more information. The Goldfingers are cited in several books. There's a Polish beer historian who's at the University of Krakow that wrote several books that cite it, but they're all his era is post Goldfinger era that he focuses on. He told me a year ago that he was going to be looking at like earlier breweries. So I hope that he'll discover some more information, because we would love to find some kind of formula.
Oh, sure.
I don't know how they would document that, but most of the documents that we've collected are visible in our tap room. When you walk in, if you look on your left-hand side, there's a whole bunch of advertisements and stuff from the newspaper in Krakow.
When did you become aware of this family history? Was it always something that you knew about your family, or was it later in your life?
It was later. I'd like to say that. So we discovered it after me and my brother had gotten kind of really into craft beer, and it was more so because of the advent of like the genealogy websites, because we discovered, like, my family just is all over the world as a result of multiple world wars. And we ended up discovering a cousin in the same cousin I was talking about, who lives in Warsaw, as a result of that, and that connected so many dots that were sort of dead ends for the longest time. And that's when we saw, like, oh my goodness, like, this is like a family business that we had no clue about. But at the time, I was running like controlled experiments with 1 gallon batches in my apartment with my brother in Chicago, and I'm like, this has got to be a sign. I mean, something inside of me was telling me I need to do this thing, and here we go. We just discovered that, like, actually we have ancestry that did this, and that's the moment that I decided, you know what, I have so much passion for this, and I think that there's a reason, and so I'm going to set out to eventually try to revive the old family tradition.
And so that is the inspiration for why you focus on lagers now, or was there more that you liked them, or it was that was what they were brewing?
That is part of it. Right around the time that they were brewing, and we even have the amount of volume, but it was in the hundreds of thousands of hectoliters in annual production.
Oh, damn.
So, like, pretty sizable brewery, especially for that time. But it was a combination of the fact that they were likely brewing these styles at the time because lager yeast had finally been isolated at the Carlsberg Brewery, and after that happened, it proliferated all across Europe, including Poland. So there's a little bit of history there, but also just driven by the beers that I like, and it's ultimately our business, and I want to be able to wake up every morning, go in the brewery, and do something that I love, that I'm truly passionate about, and I think is the epitome of a beer experience. So
there's a lot going on today. And so we've talked about, a summer ale. We talked about a hef. Was there a lager that sparked this specific one that sparked this interest in lagers? Or was it just kind of over time you realized, I keep going back to these?
No, I don't think that there was one specific one. I think that there was a baseline of an affinity toward lager beer in general. But I would say what kind of solidified it, what reinforced it, and what gave me a vision for what Goldfinger could be today was my World Brewing Academy experience in Munich. Just drinking lager beer that I didn't know could be so quaffable yet flavorful, and be almost at the commodity level. No, you don't need a glass of water on the table. You need a liter of beer on the table, kind of thing.
It's cheaper.
Exactly. So that just kind of solidified it for me. That just experiencing it and seeing how it can foster some awesome experiences, awesome interactions with people, bring people together. I was like, this has got to be what we do.
And when you went to the World Brewing Academy, did you know you wanted to start your own brewery and bring a legacy?
That's why I did it.
That's why. It wasn't that you just, I got to be in beer. It's like, I want to do this.
Well, what I discovered as a home brewer, even though I was doing these experiments, some of them were taking a while. And of course, my knowledge base was so limited at the time that I say that, I'm trying to do controlled experiments, but at the time I had no concept of like what oxygen ingress could do to a beer. Right. So like how am I doing actual true experiments? But I discovered that between time and my lack of knowledge, if I wanted to in this life revive my family's brewery, I needed to know a hell of a lot more, and I needed to know a hell of a lot more quicker.
You weren't going to get there 1 gallon at a time.
Right. Was not going to get there 1 gallon at a time. So I took the online like there was like an introductory course through Siebel. And then that kind of confirmed that, yeah, this is still what I want to do. And that's when I enrolled in the World Brewing Academy.
Nice. And you said they found a Zwickel,
Yep.
say 500 miles. How far was it from?
Yeah, about I think it was about 500 miles.
And that's on a lot of your cans, right?
It is.
That
It's on.
image?
It's on. Although, yeah, it's right there.
Yeah.
That's it. It's on every single can.
You have an affinity for side pull faucets. Does some of it come from seeing that Zwickel? Because it has a very similar shape. I don't know if the mechanics are the same, but there's something very beautiful about that mirrors the side pull faucets now.
I think the side pull thing came just out of beer geekiness. I'm a brewer, so we learn a lot about valves. We learn about flow and fluid. What do you call it?
Dynamics.
Fluid dynamics,
Turbulence.
Exactly, and pumps, and the mechanical side of brewing is really interesting to me because it's probably the area where I'm like least. It's my weakest area, so it really drives me to be better at that. But I love consuming that kind of information. My father-in-law is like super mechanical, and he fixes a lot of stuff for us at home. And if he was at the brewery today because we had a sink that backed up, rotting it down, I'm like, I want to stand here and learn all of this stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, so understanding the technology of the side pull, it just made absolute sense to me that like I care about presentation, I care about the quality of the pour, and this faucet, as far as I can see, provides more control over all of that than any faucet on the market. It's also beautiful, and it's from a region where the Goldfingers existed, so it just made sense to me.
Chris is a notorious side pull skeptic. I wouldn't say hater. I would say skeptic.
No, I think little by little I'm starting to get into at least be a little bit open.
If you had to make an argument to Chris to get one here, not that they should or would, what would it be? Why should a bar have a side pull faucet?
I don't know. They should.
Sure. Good answer.
I would say that if somebody is as excited as I was or continue to be about controlling the presentation of that beer and the flow of that beer, and it starts from there, then hell yeah, put it in. But I would say don't put it in if you're doing it because it's trendy.
Right. Well, so why would you put it in? Like what can you do with those pours, and more just for letting people know what you can do with them, because I've definitely learned a little bit about them, not a lot, but
yeah, I think
what can they do that a typical Perlick faucet can't?
I think that they can help. Well, they change the way that beer tastes in a way, but I think more importantly, there continues to be in this country this idea that foam is a bad thing, that you're being cheated out of the beer you paid for if there's too much head on the beer, and there's no value that foam brings to the drinking experience. And that's sometimes that gap is sometimes hard to bridge if you're relying on the standard foam that you create out of a faucet, because that's going to be rich in the hop resins, polyphenols, obviously proteins in there that are going to have more of a bitter and unpleasant flavor. I don't particularly like drinking just like dry foam because, I guess it depends on the beer, but I think it's not a great representation of what the beer is. With a side pull, you can sweeten the deal, literally, because you're putting the ratio of beer to all the hop resins, polyphenols and stuff. There's more beer in it. So it tastes more like beer. It's wet. It's not that dry, bitter foam. And you can put an 1.5 inch, 2 inch cap of that in a mug, and you can drink right through it, and it tastes great. So there's an opportunity for like an educational play there, but also just because to me, from the top to the bottom of the glass, it's all cohesive.
We had Randy Mosher on the podcast a while ago, and he was talking about he's writing a book about smells. And he told us something that about 65 to 70% of the aromatics of a beer are actually inside of the CO2 bubble. And so I'm almost certain the way you present the foam and the CO2 bubble to someone could have one of the largest impacts on how that beer is perceived.
No doubt about it.
Which is something you just never think about. And it's when you have beers that are headless and think people are being cheated. What you're really being cheated by is that you're getting 14-ounce pint glasses. That's the real cheat.
Exactly.
It's not that there's foam on top of it. But foam is good. Foam is, like the same way fat is flavor, foam is aroma. Foam is how you experience beer.
Absolutely.
The flavor of beer is mostly aromas.
So with a side pull, you can control the quality of that foam very, very easily. It's basically just a ball valve technology, but in the tip of the faucet is this micro screen that's going to cause turbulence to occur as it comes out of the faucet. And depending on how wide open you open that ball valve, unlike a standard faucet that's a plunger, that's going to create a different character of turbulence, and that's going to dial in, allow the foam to be a little bit drier or a little bit more wet. You can do different types of pours that serve different functions. Like there's a style pour where you fill clear beer up to the point where you want to put foam, and then you shut the faucet off and you just crack it open enough so that only foam comes out, and you put this cap of foam on top of clear beer. And the whole point of that type of pour is the cap basically captures a lot of the carbonation inside of the beer because it's just weighing it down there. It's not promoting the escape of CO2 as much as all other pours are. And you can have a long meal drinking a beer like that. And the point would be to keep the effervescence in there for a longer time because you're eating as well, not just drinking.
Right.
But if you're just drinking one after the other, then you do the Hladinka pour, which is what we typically do, which is you start off with the foam and then fill clear beer underneath that foam. But what we've already started to do is promote the breaking out of some of the CO2 on its way up.
That's awesome. Yeah, you and Zygmus at Beer Miscuous and Highwood are two of the people that know the most about this that I've ever talked to and nerd out about it. And I don't know how to do it, but when you guys pour me beers in those different pours, it is markedly different and a really cool experience. And I would suggest anyone who can make it to Goldfinger go and get some of these beautiful pours.
Yeah, Zygmus is fighting the good fight.
He is.
He's gone all in on it, and I think that's great.
Yeah. You said there was a third beer that might have changed your life. You said there was the Anchor, there's a Pauliner, and then you said there was a third one that you had thought of.
Well, now that you say change your life, then I'm going to take that back.
Let's take this lower stakes.
My third
inspired you in some way.
I think just retroactively, the fact that my dad was drinking a Victory Prima, like in the first distribution of Victory to Chicagoland.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, Pennsylvania brewery. I think that's awesome. I just think back to it, and I think that I was a kid, I was unaware, and I was a kid for so long that I wasn't aware that the influence around me was already kind of predisposing me to what I would eventually deem as good and tasty and valuable. Mm-hmm. And I look back at that beer, especially now that I know what that beer was.
Yeah. Back
then and what it is even today, and I'm like, wow, That's a big influence.
Yeah, there's like almost a direct lineage to what. That's got to be one of the first American like craft or micro brew, maybe at the time, lager beers that was like that wasn't Yingling or something that was trying to be or was a localized version of, for like a macro lager.
Yeah,
it had to be the first one that was like we're both craft beer and we are a lager. And I wonder it's still somewhat of an uphill battle, right? To get people to value these things the way that you think they should be valued. I can't imagine what it was in 1999 or whenever this came out. And we're still living in kind of this hangover, for lack of a better word, of fizzy yellow beer is what lager is, and that is the enemy of flavorful craft beer. Yep. So for them to be out there doing that, and that wasn't in the 90s they came out with that beer, right?
In the 90s, yep. I don't remember the date that they sent some out to Chicago, but my dad bought it, and I just remember being very young and thinking that it was cool that my dad was giving me a sip of beer and then immediately regretting it and wondering why he drinks this swill.
I mean, that's what you were thinking? How old were you when you had your first sip of creamer?
See, I don't know. I'm trying to...
You don't want to give it away?
Yeah, no, I don't want to get my dad in trouble.
You're 23, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember having that beer for the first time, being very confused by it because I was just getting into craft beer, and this was probably quite a bit later, 15 years later, maybe longer, and being confused. And because, I think I've said on episodes of this show before, the first time I had Daisy Cutter, I leaned over to my friend and was like, we were in the tasting room. It's like, anyone who says they like that is probably fucking lying. And
Do you still feel that way?
No, it became one of my favorite beers.
Of course.
But I had a Bombe, which was like their rye stout at the same time, that I was like, this is actually pretty good. And it was like that arrogance of I think I was like 21 and like 2 months old, where like the arrogance of knowing like what good beer is because I had a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale or something.
Right, exactly.
Was very funny. And then I remember that experience with Daisy Cutter a lot more than I remember the Bombe. I remember liking the Bombe, but that I've always been someone who is predisposed to being attracted to things that I don't quite understand. In all, like when there's a feeling of there's some there, and I don't get it. It's prone to pretension where I'm like, I got to figure out what this is, and so that probably drove me more than like the one.
So it
where
sparked some curiosity in you then.
That, and I had a crush on the girl who worked at Baker at the time. But
I'm sure that had nothing to do with it.
Not at all.
Nothing.
No, but like, very quickly I started like going there and getting growlers of it, and just still not liking it, and trying to understand it, and understand what was going on in it, and why is this something that people like?
I had a similar experience with Daisy Cutter.
Yeah. It was the first poppy beer I'd ever had too. So
yeah,
I don't know if I ever answered the second question. I don't know if I still don't have a definitive answer of why do people like this. I like it now, but I don't know if I can answer like why is this something that I understand what's going on with it more or less in the how do you make this type of thing, but I don't know if I ever sufficiently answered the question of why are people so attracted to this. It doesn't make sense. Like all the things like bitterness is something that people are biologically prone to not like. It's a relatively dry beer. Like it's so it's not like you're biologically being like, oh, there's calories in this that I can have. Like I still don't quite have an answer of why that is something that, or even.
I think it's probably evolved too,
because
now it's such a staple of Chicago craft beer that it's probably changed in your mind what it is.
Oh, for sure.
Why people like it, and why people like it today versus why they liked it when it first came out. I think that it's probably one of the best examples locally that I could think of that represented what I believed at the time was the craft beer movement.
Yeah, capital C, capital B, right?
Yep.
Craft beer. This is it.
This is it.
Yeah.
And the specific nuances of flavors and aromas weren't as important as the symbolism of a bold beer brewed locally with the Chicago label and a cool, or with Chicago on the label and just a cool looking kind of different label. Those were all the important things at that time.
Sure.
And I think I trained myself to like it. Because I liked all of the other stuff so much. I was like, this is our beer. This is brewed here. And and it's not Budweiser or Miller.
I'm also attracted to the idea that the things you do are intentionally representative of something you believe about yourself, right? And the things you like or present to other people that you like are intentional representations of who you want to be and who you think you are. I mean, I think I still do that. And I've gotten more comfortable with the fact that, sometimes this is just more aspirational than it is that I actually understand what this is. I mean, saisons are
beer
gross.
temple instead of beers to revere, beers to aspire to.
Right? Yeah. And I think that's part of what craft beer was for me, at least when we started, was that this is something that is, and I've grown into other aspects of it that I believe in, but something that is unique and different and felt very much of, I know it was happening other places, but in Chicago, very much of my generation, it was
absolutely
a young, cool thing that was happening. And there's other aspects of it, that I appreciated later in life, local economics and local presentation, local representation of flavors as culture and flavors as beliefs of what is valuable. It sounds like a big high-minded idea, but I think it's real.
I agree. I mean, I feel a sense of pride when I'm in a different city, and even in a world with so many craft beer options, somebody hears Chicago and they might mention I've had Daisy Cutter.
Yeah.
I feel a sense of pride.
Yeah.
For
sure.
Yeah, it's Chicago's beer.
I remember being in, this was really early on, it was probably 2012, being in Massachusetts and talking to someone about how Daisy Cutter was their favorite pale ale and they liked it better than Edward. And I just had Edward from Hill Farms for the first time. And I was like, well, you're crazy, but it's really good. I felt pride, and I didn't even work in beer then. I worked in a liquor store, and I was like, yeah, Chicago rocks. But I mean, and just the idea that the things we make are, whether or not we want them to be, expressions of what we believe and who we are. And if you don't think about it, then part of the expression of that thing is that you didn't think about it that much, that's baked into it. And when anyone makes anything, all those things are active in the thing you end up coming up with, and the thoughtfulness and how you get there can be different for everyone, right? It can be a really technical experience. It can be a really creative experience. It can be a really romantic experience. But one thing about beer that's really interesting is that to get the creative and romantic and idealistic one is you have to be a very good technical producer of things.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a guy named Ramen Lord. That's not his real name, but he's internet famous for knowing everything about ramen. And we both started geeking out about beer and about his ramen. And he wrote this 100-page ebook that was everything about ramen and technical aspects of ramen. And then he was like, this is just so I can get to the creative part. And that's how I feel about it. It's all the stuff you learn about, all the data points that you're collecting, all the, the way you're injecting air into the beer instead of pure oxygen. All that technical stuff is necessary practice for self-expression, and a good self-expression, and to feel competent at something. For me, I make a different style of beer where there's a little bit wider of a runway to land the plane on. It can be a little funkier and a little weirder, but in reality, I'm not trying to land in the entirety of the landing strip. We're trying to land it in a very specific spot, and that's how I want to express myself. It's very technically proficient at making something that doesn't have to be, kind of. There's a lot of more leeway in saison, but
Well, I would say with your beers, just kind of thinking about Half Acre and how I'm thinking back to we've mentioned a few different instances of nostalgia in craft beer, and how I don't even remember if that was online or offline. Maybe it was offline, but anyway, when I have your beer, so our beers, I would say, are in a certain sense the antithesis of what craft beer has been for a long time. And I don't do it. We never wanted to do it to from a point of pretension or exclusion. We didn't want to say like, you guys have been drinking not beer.
Right.
Welcome back to beer, kind of thing.
Beer flavored beer.
Beer flavored beer. Yeah, exactly. I think we consciously don't say that.
Yeah.
But from the palate's perspective, we did feel like there was a void in balance in craft beer, and there was a void in like getting very technical about things. Not saying that there weren't breweries that were super technical and researching and within their realm, even if it's an IPA, but that wasn't the norm. The norm had become like people love craft beer, and I made a good batch of beer at home with and all my buddies say that I should open a brewery, so I'm going to open one up. So since we've opened, I just drink a lot of our beer. I find myself not being as adventurous as I once was, and part of me is okay with that, but the other part of me is like missing what was really exciting about craft beer.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I found is your beer is kind of a good segue back into exploration of different flavors, different styles, because to me, yeah, I mean, you wouldn't really necessarily want to make a clean saison, if it's clean by lager definition.
Right.
But there is balance, thoughtful balance, not necessarily everything being at the same level, but how do you have one bold flavor complement a different bold flavor? So I've found that those have it's kind of like dipping my toe into the cold pool again, and your beers have helped with that, and I hope that it kind of opens up another realm of like getting back into trying different things. I'm just so afraid of having shit that I don't like because that happened to me so much that I'm just like, do I want to waste like?
Well, and you know you have something that you really like, right?
Exactly.
And that you make it, and I
and I know that might sound arrogant, but no, it's like it's true. Like if I didn't
Right.
like it, we wouldn't put it out there.
Right.
And I do like it, and it's the styles I like. And
Right.
so now I have to be kind of convinced to branch out.
Right. Well, and you get so not that you get so used to your own thing, but you're so aware of your own beer and how much, and you forget how much you like. This is me speaking for myself, but you forget how much you like your own beer for a while, and then you go and I drink other things that you think you're gonna like, and you're like, I really just like my beer the best, which makes you feel great in some ways. It makes you feel like you're kind of an idiot in some other ways,
Right.
or maybe you're just not having the right things. But if you don't make your favorite beer, like, what are you doing?
I know.
It seems like a weird question, or seems kind of shitty, I guess. But I genuinely, if you have a brewery and you don't make your favorite beer, what are you doing? Like, even if it's not the
agree.
thing you make the most of,
I agree.
Like, you should make your favorite beer. Yeah. And you should drink a lot of your own beer. There's no shame in that. Like, that means you're doing a good job, and even if you're the only one drinking it. But one of the things when I started was that I was seeing and hearing a lot specifically was people making beers that they were not excited by.
Oh, I
and
know.
then just shrugging it off. And like the thing people would always say is like, well, the kids love it. Yeah. And it's like, that made me so mad. Because if you're gonna make something,
selling your soul.
well, if you're gonna make something, do the best you can at it.
Yeah.
And like it's like when you hear people talk about acting, and you have a character that's kind of a character you wouldn't want to hang out with. Your job is to find out what you would like about that person and why that's a real person, not to like make fun of that. That's a terrible performance. And so you would see all these beers where it's like, yeah, that's what you're doing is you're acting in a terrible way, and that beer is soulless.
Not to mention that it goes against what craft beer was initially intended to be, which was this handcrafted, artisanal, small batch deal that was full of flavor, and sacrificing profit to create that, not picking the cheapest ingredient to be able to sell.
Right.
So like making stupid beers that the kids like it, like, okay, sure, maybe it costs more because you're putting so much crap in it.
Right.
But the bottom line is you're doing it because you know that that's what will sell.
Right.
And what is that doing to the industry as a whole? I think we're starting to see that. I mean, we're not growing anymore. In fact, we're shrinking.
Right.
Why? Because we went so hard in one direction, which was topping each other, who could do it bigger, who could do it better.
Right.
And that alienated a huge section of the population that was ready, willing, and able to support craft beer if you did something that catered to them.
Right. And whether or not it was actually true from every brewery, it felt like an act of love for them to be making something that was so kind of weird and kind of mystifying as Daisy Cutter was for me. Like there's something that they're trying to say here, and there's some reason they're doing this other than just like this is the most slick commodity we can make.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a gimmick.
Right.
Sure, it was a statement, but it wasn't gimmicky.
Right. And so what I feel from your beers and what I try to do with mine is that this is an act of love to share the thing that I got really good at with people, and hopefully it delights them and they respond to something that is very pure and true to me and what I believe about the world in general and beer specifically, which is
Agreed.
More than just like it tastes good.
Yeah.
It tastes good because I had an idea and I shared it with you, and I did my best to express it. It's no different than like learning the guitar for me when I went to wanted to get really technically good at the guitar so I could express more purely. And at a certain point, your chops or your technical ability melds with who you are, and you can just express yourself through things. And that's what I taste in your beers, that you've done that.
Wow. Thank you.
I don't know how we got there, but it was. I think it's very true, and I feel like that's a conversation we have had off air too. But
I think that not this is not the rule, but I think one observation that I make, and I hope that this is kind of true, is you can kind of tell when you drink somebody's beer if the brewery is a passion project that has all the support, even if you're not the owner, but has all the support from ownership. Right. That what you do is an art, and do what you need to do to make it, to fully express it. Mm-hmm. Versus owning a craft brewery sounds pretty cool. Yeah. And so here is a list of the top 5 styles that are selling right now, and brew that. Right. And I think that you can tell that in a lot of beer that you have. Mm-hmm. And frankly, like even if the personnel who's making the beer at that place is putting everything they can into making it better, I think that there's a ceiling, because there's always going to be a limit on process time, ingredients you can source, timing of a style, yeast limitations. There's always a ceiling. So I wouldn't blame the brewers, and I'm sure there's brewers out there who are more or less stuck in that kind of world.
And if you don't pay attention, it's easy to slip. If you aren't truly doing it to be an expression of yourself, and it just kind of is something you like to do as part of it, it's easy to slip from one to the other. It's logical to slip from one to the other,
Sure.
to be honest. Like every financial pressure is always to slip from one to the other.
Sure.
There's never a short-term financial gain to sticking to your guns, really.
Yep.
That's a long, hard-fought thing about connecting with people rather than how do we optimize the dollar per unit.
We're having this sort of self-righteous conversation as two broke breweries doing things that don't make them money.
Yeah, right. So take out everything we say with a grain of salt.
Yeah, huge grain of salt.
But I believe in the things I make, and I know you do too.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, Tom, I think that's probably a good spot for us to wrap this up. Is there anything you want to tell anyone out there? Anything you need people to know about Goldfinger happenings at your spot in the near future?
We just got some awesome beers coming down the pike. We got coming up, we have our Dunkel, one of my favorite once a year beers that we make. We have a pretty exciting beer that we did with Revolution, which was huge for me because that was another beer that was pretty influential in me actually trying to brew my first beer. I should have mentioned this. Eugene Porter was one of my favorite craft beers at the time, and me and my brother bought a brew your own kit porter. Ended up being the absolute crap. Nothing like Eugene.
That was the kit's fault, right?
Totally the kid's fault.
Absolutely the kid's fault.
Zero oxygen. Like this was a perfect brew.
Yeah.
I mean, putting it in the bathtub in the carboy, like
what could go wrong?
What could go wrong?
Yeah.
But anyway, we got together and decided to make a beer. Which, when I do a collaboration, I like to do things that I otherwise wouldn't, like ours. That was like totally.
You
out
don't
of this
do
world.
that.
Yeah.
Put a bunch of wort in a tote and
Right.
have me drive it back to
Right.
them.
And the other realm that I'm so unfamiliar with is any kind of wood engaged in our beer. And
Cool.
Marty from Rev really loves our original lager.
He knows a thing or two about wood and beer.
And
huh?
he knows a thing or two about wood and beer. And I think the thing that I love the most about his approach to it was that he doesn't see our beer as something that needs improvement, doesn't even necessarily need wood, but that he has a source of wood that he really is interested in. It's this really delicate French oak that's typically used for very subtle oak touch on some lighter wines. And he just had this idea that might go, like a gentle touch into our original lager might go pretty well. So we're about to blend that next week. So we'll see how it goes.
Cool.
So I'm excited for that one.
That sounds great.
Totally out of my realm. So unless it's really awesome, then it was all my idea.
It's a pure expression of who you are.
Pure expression. That's
Great.
it. Yeah, just keep supporting Beer Temple. We love you guys, and keep drinking more lager.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard, seen from again. Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard, seen from again. Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard, seen from again.